And welcome back to my channel. Unless you're new here, and then just welcome. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And welcome to day 4 of my space horror, space thriller, space festival. And we are going to be talking about Outland. I'll tell you, having this on Blu-ray is so cool. This is probably, I thought about it earlier. And I'm like, is it? And I'm like, I think it is. This is probably my favorite Sean Connery movie, along with The Hunt for Red October. And that is Outland. Yes, it is Outland. So, Outland was released in 1981. It's rated R with a runtime of 1 hour and 49 minutes. It was directed and written by Peter Hyams, and it stars Sean Connery, Francis Sternhagen as Dr. Lazarus, and Peter Boyle. Okay. Now, this movie opens on a mining colony. It is a mining colony on Io, which is, of course, a moon. So, we see the arrival of a new marshal. That is the person who runs the law enforcement team of these mining colonies. They come for a 1-year tour, and he has arrived 2 weeks ago. So it is ran by the Con Amalgamate Corporation with a population of 2,144 people, and he has now showed up for his 1-year tour of this. He had also brought along his wife Carol and his son Paul, and so, they start meeting everyone. We are introduced to Shepard, who is the leader of the actual mining operations. So he's the general manager of this place. And, first thing we see is this miner who freaks out. Because you have to remember, there's only one section of this mining colony that is pressurized. Everything down in the mines, everything above is zero pressure. You know what I'm saying? So we see a miner down there, and he just starts randomly freaking out, thinking that he's got spiders on him. And he starts screaming at them that he's got to get them out of his suit, and a couple of guys try to disconnect to go help him, but they can't get there in time, and he undoes his thing, and that's a big mess. You know what I'm saying? Instant decompression inside of your suit. So we see his head swell up and bust, and it's very, very nice. It's pretty fucking nasty. So he thinks he's covered in spiders. We then start seeing what we can obviously tell is some kind of drug dealing activity going on in the various places in this colony. We see Sean meeting the rest of, having a little powwow, meeting all of the department heads, and meeting, being introduced to everyone. Then we see him meeting his team, his deputies, the marshal's deputies, introducing himself, and talking about let's all do good work, stuff like that. So his wife doesn't seem very happy to be at this place, and after that meeting, the way that Shepard acted, Sean, Sean, I'm going to call him Sean. But William, he really didn't, because his name is William O'Neill, he didn't really like the way that this Shepard guy said stuff to him. So he was telling his deputy, his sergeant, that he didn't really like that because they've become friends over these 2 weeks. And he's like, that he didn't like the way that he was seemingly insinuating things like, just let people do what they want to do and don't make waves. And the sergeant informed him that he didn't need to cross this guy. This guy was very powerful in the company and stuff like that. So right after that, we see our next very gross mishap. And that is where another miner is down there. And he just decides to go into the elevator and take it to the bottom of the mine with no suit on. So when people see him getting into the elevator, they start, the guys start like yelling and squealing, and they uncouple themselves. Those that were in their suits already, they uncoupled themselves because it's like the dressing room where you get all ready to go down there. And they can't get in, and he does. He closes the door and he goes down there. And believe me, the guys at the bottom, when that door opens, they show you what's in there. And what's in there is like pieces of that dude everywhere. There's this big mass of flesh, but everything inside has been blown out all over the... so that was a very cool. Now, this is when Will goes and meets the doctor, Francis Sternhagen, who is phenomenal in this movie. And he talks to her and introduces himself, and then he asks her about that, and she's a real smart ass, and she's like, I don't know what makes people go crazy, they just go crazy, and she says a couple of doctor's jokes like, oh, you want to see me? Go take an aspirin and call me in the morning. Well, he tells her that he wants, what did she think about these mining accidents? Oh no, well, shit happens. And he's like, look, I want a report on all incidents like this for the last 6 months. And I want it by this evening, or I'm going to come back and kick your nasty ass. Because she's such a sarcastic bitch. And he said, and that's a Marshall joke for you. So he walks out, but, you can tell that they're going to get along, and they do. You can tell that she kind of likes him. And, so he goes back to his room only to find his wife and son are gone. And there's a message that, is voice activated when he calls out her name. And she tells him that she can't do this anymore, that their son, who's 13, has never been to Earth. And that every time he says it's going to be different and it's going to quit this shit, that he doesn't. And that she loves him very much, and his son loves him very much, and they love him very much, and they wish he would come with him, but they can't do this anymore. She wants him to be raised on Earth in fresh air. And I can understand that. And so she's gone. So now he has to deal with this new job, but he also has to deal with the fact that his family is going 70 hours away to a starbase to then get on a 1-year journey to go back to Earth. So he's not a happy fella. And he certainly isn't in the mood to, to play around with whatever the fuck is going on at this place. So he ends up, the sergeant comes to see him and brings him some food and is like, hey, I understand my wife left me for the same reason, because I was never home and out here in space doing this shit. And while they're talking, though, there's another emergency. Now, right prior to that, we had seen more drug dealing. This time we saw more of it. We saw a guy actually get it, and he goes back to his little bunk, and we see him get out his gear, and he shoots this red stuff with like a air syringe. So he takes these drugs, and now where they were eating dinner, they get a call about an emergency, and he has flipped completely out as well. He's got some hooker. She's in a room. He's beat her half to death. He is totally like on 20 different leagues of crack, is what he's acting like. And they go, and Will tries to calm him down and tell him they're going to come in. Meanwhile, his his sergeant goes up through the rafters to come down into the room. And right as Will gets the door open, I mean, that dude drops out the ceiling, but he's like 14 feet away. I mean, it's a big room, and he's like 14 feet away, and all the dude's got a 6-inch knife. He shotguns his whole chest open. And you're like, was that really necessary? I mean, I know it's cop culture, but is that really necessary? You're 14 feet from the dude. He had a 6-inch knife. Unless he was a shirking expert, I don't think he's going to hurt you with that knife from across the room. And Will said the same thing. He wasn't exactly happy about him having just blew this man open. So he goes back to the doctor, and they're looking at the injuries on this girl, and they're talking about, here's another person that's freaked out. And he asked her about autopsies and stuff like that on the other people and stuff, and she says, no, but I do have those reports that you asked for. And it was something like there were 26 incidents like this in the last 6 months. And there was 24 incidents. She said, I even did you one better. I went further. There were 24 in the 6 months prior to that. And he's like, oh. And she said, but you want to know what's funny? In the 6 months prior to that, so we're at a year now, in the 6 months prior to that, there was only 2 incidents. So something has changed. And Will immediately gets very suspicious that something is going on. And the company never wants any autopsies. She tells him that the company never doesn't want any autopsies, and they jettison the bodies on the way back to Earth. Burial at sea and all that crap. So that was her exact words. And so he sneaks down there into the loading bay where he knows that guy's body's at, and he gets a blood sample, brings it back to her. And she does a bunch of testing on it, and they discover there's something in there. And she manages to get the machine to working right, because she don't know what the hell this isn't the kind of work she usually does. But she finally gets it analyzed, and it turns out to be a known drug. And she's like, oh my God, I cannot believe these idiots are taking this drug. And then she explains to him what it is, and that it is an extremely powerful amphetamine. So it's like cocaine. It's like crack, And she's like, that it was a drug that that the military created and tested it on military soldiers, and it worked fine. They certainly did get more work done. Unfortunately, after you've taken it for a few months, it also causes psychosis. So they discontinued it, and now it's become like an underground narcotic drug. So now Will, I told you I'd keep doing that. Now Will knows that there is a company-driven drug trade going on that is killing these innocent guys. Now granted, they're not so innocent in that they're shooting this shit up, but they're wanting to do it because of the bonus money that they make from working more. And the company wants it kept quiet. The corporation wants it kept quiet because they're making more money and they're making more ore. That's the monsters in this movie, is the drugs and the corporation. Just like today in America. So he decides, and he tells his sergeant, he's like, no, that's not going on here. I'm not putting up with this shit. And the sergeant's like, well, why do you think you were put here? And this is his whole purpose. Why do you think you were put here? You were put here because you probably were, they figured you would just go with the flow. So he begins to surveillance everyone, and he's looking for these drug dealers and drug activity, and he does end up finding one, and he spots one, and it is a fantastic, he also spots that shepherd guy and his deputy in like talking a little too closely, if you know what I mean. So he ends up going, and right before he does this with the drug dealer, he confronts his deputy and is like, how deep are you in this? And he's like, I'm not really that deep. I just am paid to turn my head. I don't involve myself in any other way. So he's like, okay, well, I ain't going to do anything to you because I want Shepherd. I want that motherfucker. So that's when he spots a drug deal going down, and it's one of the coolest, longest, violent chase scenes that you've ever seen, because he's chasing that dude all through this packed colony, and he finally does manage to get him, but geez, man, that is a very action-packed chase scene. So he gets him and he puts him in a cell, and out here in their cells are, you don't just keep a person in a cell, they keep him in a suit floating in the air as punishment, right? So the cells actually aren't pressurized, and they're kept in a spacesuit floating in the air. Well, the guy refuses to talk, and he's like, okay, that's fine. You can just float there. Hopefully your air thing won't get tied up and suffocate, but okay. So he then goes and talks to Shepherd and is like, I know what's going on here, and I'm not going to put up with it. And he's like, oh, sure, just tell me how much money you want. And he's like, I don't want any money. I want this. This is not going to happen around me. He's like, why the hell do you think that you were brought here? So he starts getting the idea that, am I a piece of shit like these people? Is that what the company thinks of me? Is that what, am I thought of as a person who would play along with this shit? So it kind of hurts his ego. And it's like he's being told that he's a bad person that will let bad shit go on. And he doesn't. I think that's why he gets so hard-assed about it. So he goes back to talk to that guy again, the drug dealer, but somebody's already got to him. They cut his cord and he's blown up in his suit. He then goes to try to find his sergeant, finds his sergeant strangled to death in the closet, and that was an ugly scene as well. That looked way too real for comfort. So now he's like really pissed, and he goes and continues his investigation, and he actually, now he's surveying, he's bugging Shepherd, he's doing all of this stuff, and he ends up finding where he thinks the drugs are coming in, which is being packed inside of beef. Like the beef that hangs there in the cooler. It's being packed up in it. So he goes there and he's attacked and plays dead until he sees which piece of meat that guy tries to get into, and then he knocks him out, puts him away, gets all the drugs, destroys them, and then goes and tells Shepherd, guess what I found? And guess what I did? Now you can imagine Shepherd was very, very upset. He's like a drug kingpin. He's very, very upset because like his entire supply of shit is gone, which means his workers aren't going to work as hard. You see what I mean? It's all like, just another link in the chain. And so he's like, you're dead, motherfucker. Didn't bother mind saying it at all. So Will starts paying attention to the bugs, and he overhears a message in which Shepherd has gotten in trouble about all these drugs, his last shipment being taken. And so he is calling in 2 professional hitmen to take this fucker out, because nobody there is going to help. Nobody's going to do anything, which is true. So Will now knows that there's 2 hitmen coming in 70 hours from the space station. So he kind of feels out people. The population, they're not going to help him. He even calls in his own sergeant, his new sergeant, because the other one's dead. He calls in a new sergeant and he asks him, like, am I going to get any help? No, sir, we've all got families and stuff. He's like, I got a family too. So, okay, I understand. So he knows he's not going to get any help from anybody. So he starts like prepping. What would you do? You know what I mean? It's not like you can go run off somewhere. You're on your own IO, for God's sakes. What are you going to do? So he starts kind of prepping the station for the showdowns that he knows is coming. And the doctor comes in when he's playing. I don't know what they call it. I've played it before, but I don't know what they call it. It's that where you're in a room and you're hitting a tennis ball off the wall. I can't think of it. But anyway, he's doing that. She comes in and she sits down and she has a talk with him, and she's like, why are you doing this? And that's when he admits kind of what you had gotten the idea of. And he says, I think that they sent me to this place because they think I'm a piece of shit. And I'm not a piece of shit. And I'm a good person. And they sent me here because that's what they think of me. And I just want to see if that's true or not. And she goes, what does that mean? He said, if I was the kind of person, I would, 1, have not done anything about it to begin with. Or 2, I'd fucking get my ass up and leave. I would have done left because I didn't want no part of this. So either way, I wouldn't have interfered in their operation if I was the kind of person that they seem to think that I am. And I know I'm not. And to make sure that I can raise my son with pride and that I can be prideful as a good person, I need to stay and face this to prove that I am able, that I am not what they think that I am. And she's like, okay. I still think we'll lose, but I will help. So he's got one person that will help him in this mess, and that's the doctor. So he nervously waits down the tick-tock of the timer for the shuttle to arrive. It does. He's watching, and he spots the 2 hitmen because they're very obvious, because nobody cares. And the showdowns begin. There are a huge, it's a great act. This part of the movie is a great act. It's all dark and dank, and everything is so stealthy. And these hitmen, these assassins aftering him, and he's skirting them at every turn. And every once in a while they'll have a clash, but he gets away. And he doesn't really know what to do, She does help a great deal because she's like, goes to CNC and she's like watching, and she like goes and finds him, and it's like, you're going the wrong way, you're heading straight for them, there is a trap. So she actually helps, and he's like, okay, going back to your office. She said, no, I'm going to help. So he's like, no. She's like, yes, I am. I'm an asshole, and I'm going to do what I want to. So what do I need to do? So he actually gives her a couple of things to do. The first takedown is really cool. He's on like a covered catwalk, and Sean Connery, Will, has now gotten dressed and decides that he's going to take care of this from the outside because he's already been shot. So he thinks he can, like, maybe he can control things more from the outside. So he's in the spacesuit, and he tells her, he's like, I'm going to lead him to this pressurized catwalk, gangway kind of thing. And when he gets in it, shut the door. And so on the outside, he's undoing the joists, and getting it ready for explosive decompression. And it works. And so he like decompresses that area, and that dude like blows up like Jabba the Hutt, and then looks like spaghetti all over the wall. And so that was like another really gross kill. There is a lot of blood and gore in this movie. So then the second showdown ending is really cool as well. He's outside the hydroponics greenhouse, it's big, huge. I mean, how else are you going to have air at these places? So he likes trying to figure out what to do because that guy is down there in the greenhouse. So he figures he could take one of the panels and he can throw it down the side, and that shadow of that thing falling will make that idiot, if he's as stupid as he thinks he is, that idiot would actually shoot. Well, the last thing that you want to do in a pressurized glass room is shoot the fucking glass window, right? Which is exactly what the idiot does. So the whole fucking greenhouse is sucked out into space, and that's the end of him. So you kind of think, okay, he's took care of the two hitmen, right? He's kind of like calmed and relaxed, and he's like going to go back in until boom. He gets the fuck knocked out of him. He gets shot at again because his sergeant, the new sergeant that had took over after the other one was killed, has decided to be hitman number 3 as a backup plan, I guess, and he does that. So they start chasing each other around, and Will manages to get above him on the catwalk, and he's down there on the other catwalk. So and this is all taking place outside in space. So he jumps down and lands on top of him, and they end up in this big, anxious, anxiety-ridden, face-to-face fisticuffs. And Will manages to pull his air thing out of his helmet and kick him off. So he's blowing up as he goes down there. And so that's finally it. He goes back inside, and he's all shot up and hurt, but he goes and he walks up to Shepard, who is in the bar, where everybody seems to be, because everybody either stayed in their room or they was at the club. Because nobody, that whole colony was basically, today is a holiday. Nobody was at work, and nobody was in the halls, because nobody wanted to get shot by these hitmen, right? So he goes into that club, and he walks right up to Shepard, and he starts to place him under arrest, and he says, oh, fuck it. And he knocked him the fuck out. I mean, he knocked the absolute shit out of him. Knocked him completely unconscious. And then he walked out, and then you see him packing in his room. Because he had gotten one last phone call from her before the shuttle arrived with the hitman on it, in which she had told him that she had actually 3 reservations for the flight back to Earth. And he got to talk to his son. That nearly made me cry, because it's just, it's a very emotional scene. And so now this has all happened. So you see him packing in his room, and this cool-ass doctor, she stops by, and she talks to him and says she wanted to say goodbye, and that he did good work, that what he did was a good thing to stop all this. And he agreed, and then you see the transmission that he sends to Carol, in which he says, keep the ticket warm for me because I'm on my way, and I will be there in time to go back home with you. So he's done a good thing, and he's learned his lesson, and the movie's ended, and it was great. So that was Outland. Now, a lot of you may be going, well, yeah, that's a cool thriller, but what is that? Space horror. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror. To me, this is a space horror movie. It's full of blood, it's full of gore, it's full of guts, great story, but there are two very big monsters in this movie, and that is corporate greed and the drugs that they use to hurt the people. Corporations destroy people's lives. They are monsters. They make their millions and their fourth house in the Hamptons and their second yacht off the backs of the working class people. Call me a revolutionary. But this movie does have monsters in it. That corporation, the flunkies for that corporation, and the drugs they use to hurt all of these poor working class men who are just trying to make money, make a living, and yet they are working them to death and pumping them full of, super crack to do it, and not caring at all that it's causing them to die in the most horrible ways that you can imagine, because I can't imagine what that dude in the elevator felt, or what that guy who thought he had spiders in his suit felt. It couldn't have been pleasant. So that was Outland, my favorite Sean Connery movie, alongside The Hunt for Red October. If you have seen this, please let me know what you think about it. Sean Connery is an absolute fantastic person. Sternhagen was remarkable in this. Peter Doyle was as evil as he needed to be. And Sean Connery was, of course, absolutely epic. And that does it for day 4. My spotlight on Outland for my Space Horror Festival. And I will see you in day 5. Love you, miss you. Bye. I always remember and never forget, you're a very, very special person, no matter what anybody tells you. And I will see you in the next thing I do. We've got 4 more. I chose 8 of my, 8 space horror, space thriller movies for this festival. And I will see you in the next one. We got 4 more to go. I'm looking forward to watching them. Yeah. I don't know if any of them are first time watches. This, of course, is not a first time watch. I love that movie. Haven't seen that since I was a kid. That is a first time watch. And the other one I haven't seen in about 15 years. So, yeah, one is a first time watch. 2 of them I haven't seen since I was 15. And one that I haven't seen probably a good 15 years. But I will see you in the next thing I do. Bye-bye.